So you guys might have noticed an extra laugh back there, and that laugh actually comes from Patrick PIANEZZA. And the reason Patrick PIANEZZA is so damn cool is because he is responsible. I don't know if that's the word you want me to use, but he is responsible for much of the writing that went into the recent, very critically acclaimed, I mean, it's everywhere, movie Code 3. It's a brilliant movie that both Spencer and I got to see early because we were special. We also had Rainn Wilson on the show earlier to talk about the movie as well and to run through a call with us. And since then, the movie has gotten a lot of traction. I keep seeing my favorite part of that movie over and over again, and that's the nursing home scene.
Well, I'm glad it resonates with you. That was the whole goal. And I will take credit for writing the film, but I will also very much say that I am the co-writer. Chris Leone, who's also the director, shares the writing credit with me and made the movie a million times better than the draft that I created.
Oh, that's wonderful. It was, but I do have to absolutely thank you for your special ability to really capture parts of EMS that all of us have experienced. And Spencer and I were talking about it, and there's so many times in the movie where we could be like, oh, I've done that call, or especially, oh, I know that paramedic, especially Rainn Wilson's character. And like everyone's like, I either know that paramedic or I have been that paramedic at various times in my career. And it was just absolutely awesome. And I have to ask this question because we brought it up with Rainn. The Winnie the Pooh scene.
Yes.
Yeah. And he goes, it's like Winnie the Pooh. Pooh bearing in my area of EMS is such a common term for that exact look where it's just a shirt and no pants. And I was wondering if you were referencing that, or is that something that came from elsewhere and just kind of an organic formation?
It was kind of a both and. So I know that I had mentioned it in passing, but it wasn't the Winnie the Pooh line. I don't believe was actually written in the script. I think we were talking about it, and I think Rainn he pulled it from me. I know he gave me credit on your show. I'll give credit back. I would have to go back and double check the script if you really want to know, but I'm familiar with the term, which is probably how it came about, but I don't think it's in the script.
I just remember like hearing that part and just being like, oh, this is so EMS-y right now. Like this is so like there's definitely a paramedic somewhere writing these lines and being like, oh yeah, this is called a Pooh Bear, like that kind of stuff. So, and then of course the nursing home scene. I love the nursing home scene. That's just a phenomenal scene about, oh, she was fine just a minute ago.
Right. Or I'm going to go get the charge nurse is also my favorite. And I think my favorite line that I know that I wrote was when Rel goes, define lately, because that was something I always wanted to ask. So I was a paramedic for 12 years in 4 different states. Or I've worked in 4 different states, I should say. And I recently just got my national registry back again last year. So I was a medic, then I wasn't a medic, and now I'm a medic again. So
you're really making that kind of character arc that Rainn does in the movie where, he's like, I'm out of this. Fuck this. I'm done.
I'm not working.
But that's how it starts. You're like, well, I'll just get my national back just to have it. But then, suddenly you find yourself in an ambulance volunteering,
how did this happen? Didn't I leave this?
Yeah. I do have to ask, if you don't mind me asking, tell me just a little bit about that journey. How do you go from paramedic to writing movies?
Well, first of all, you have to be insanely talented, which I think obviously is really my career.
Clearly.
It also helps to be just gorgeous. You can cut that. But
100%. Yeah, and the sky is blue. You obviously have those attributes. We know that.
It is what it is, guys. I mean, it's just how do you bottle this?
I'm not one to stand in the way of facts, man.
No. My path is very unique. So I worked on the ambulance all through college. I started when I was 19. I joined a fire department because I was too young to drive the ambulance. Where I grew up, the driving insurance, you had to be 21. And since I couldn't drive the truck, they wouldn't hire me. So I joined the fire department, which I thought was hilarious. So in Illinois, again, back in the day, I don't know if the DMV still has the same thing, but you had to get a special driver's license for fire trucks. And so I could drive an 85-foot fire truck, but I couldn't drive an ambulance.
Yeah. Yep.
And so I started there, and that's where I kind of got my beak wet. And I started working in the emergency room. that I did all of my clinical time in. Because again, we're talking 20 plus years ago when I first got licensed. And back then you had to do 10 hours, I think, in the ER and 10 hours in the back of the truck, along with passing all of the tests to get your basic. And I did something like 100 hours. Like, I just loved it. It was something that thrilled me. And the charge nurse was like, would you please just put an app in and we'll just pay you to work here? And that's how I got my start, which I really think, looking back, really helped my medicine because, as you know, when you're in the ER, when you're in the truck, that's one thing. But when you're in the ER, you're spending more time with these patients and you're learning a lot more about medications and pathophysiology. So I went straight through. So I went to EMT, and again, this 20 years ago, back when we had intermediates. So I went to basic, intermediate, and then straight to paramedic school. But I was working in the ER the entire time. And so building those relationships with, ER nurses and ER physicians, when I would have questions, I could just go to them and just say, hey, or you would see something that you're studying, like literally right in front of you. And so that was really fantastic. So once I got my associate's degree and I got my paramedic, I transferred to the University of South Carolina. And I've said this, I think, on every interview. I went to the real USC. So if you think that USC is in Southern California, you are incorrect. And I'm happy to defend that position. We were a university before you were a state. We win. So, like I said,
seniority.
Hot take. Went to Carolina, and then I worked 911 all through undergrad and grad school. And so I was going in class from like 9 to 3, and then I was on the truck from 7 to 7 at night usually. And like I said, did that for the 6 years of the rest of my undergrad and grad program. And then I did my postgraduate externship at Johns Hopkins. So I went to Baltimore, and because they were paying us like interns, I was on their critical care transport team, Lifeline, for a year. And then after that, I moved to California and worked for a CCT company up here for about 10 minutes. And then I was very fortunate that I was given the opportunity to run a department, and I didn't have to work 2 jobs anymore. So I started working in hospitals and did that forever. The question I think that you're actually asking is like, how do I go from that to writing a script? And the honest answer was Code 3 was literally a homework assignment in college.
Oh, wow.
In my undergraduate. My undergrad's in public relations, and I had to take a creative writing class as part of that course. Not screenwriting, mind you, just creative writing. And the professor said something very cliche, but it was the first time I'd ever heard it, and kind of, blew my brains out. And he said, if you want to tell a compelling story, write what you know. And I just came off this 14-hour hellacious shift, like had begrudgingly went to class that day. And I just remember thinking, you want a story? I'll tell you a story.
Nice.
And it was just this 36-page short story of me screaming into the void about, being burnt out and, dealing with all the stuff that we see, and turned it in. And that was Code 3. I mean, it was originally, I think your audience will appreciate this. The title that I gave the short story was Fake Stories from a Real Ambulance Driver.
That's an awesome I like that title. That's awesome.
And so, again, it was shelved. It was never intended to be a movie. It was literally a homework assignment. And and just like everybody else, like I would tell stories to the family at Christmas and Thanksgiving and stuff like that. And then, I'm out of college, and my brother went to LA. My brother always wanted to be in the film industry. He's a producer now, but he came up in VFX. And I'm visiting him in 2010 or so. And he says, do what everybody does in LA and write a script.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know anything about writing a script. Like my graduate degree, I have a master's in healthcare administration. Basically, I'm a business nerd for hospitals. Do you want me to write a script? Now, I've written plenty of articles for like EMS World, and I'd written some trade publication stuff niche to what I did in hospitals. But I was like, all right, fine, I'm bored. I'm on kind of a vacation, so I'll do it. And he said, that short story, why don't you just turn that into a script? And so that's what I did. Over a week, I kind of took that short story, wrote a narrative, and we got there's a computer program made for writing scripts called Final Draft. And that's what we used. Not sponsored by them, but hey, Apple, if you want to give it to me for free, I won't say no. And so I just literally kind of wrote that short story into a script format, and it was terrible. Like, let me be clear. The first draft is always garbage. And
perfect.
The funny thing is, if you've ever seen scripts before, there's obviously the dialogue down the middle, but on the sides is kind of like the actions that the actors are doing, or, nods to the director. And in my movie, those things were like 8 paragraphs long because I was writing it like a clinician. So I was like, oh, we're going to intubate this patient. So you're going to take the laryngoscope and hold it in your left hand. You're going to do this, that, every step along the way. And actors don't care about that. Neither do directors. And so, but to me, I was like, well, this is important. This is how you do the things.
But the interesting is we do care about that because we'll sit there and we'll notice it. We'll sit there. I was.
And so wrote that and went back and forth with my brother a couple times and trimmed a lot back. And I've said this a lot, and that is you have to be good and then you have to get lucky. And there's no magic formula. That's it. Like I know I'm a good writer, and then I just got lucky. Because if you get lucky but you suck, you're not going to get anywhere, and vice versa. There are plenty of writers out there that are much better than I am. I happened to get really lucky. And the thing that was really lucky for me was that Paul and Chris were co-workers at a VFX firm in LA. And so once we had the script written, my brother goes up to Chris and he says, "Hey, Chris, do you want to read a script?" To which Chris says, "Absolutely not," which is the right answer because no one wants to read unsolicited material. Especially if it's and Chris is a credited writer. Like he had been in the WGA. He's a director. He's a very talented man. But ultimately, my brother is nothing if not determined and wore Chris down and finally got Chris to read the script. And Chris read it and liked it enough to say, this is a new world for me. This is interesting. I want to perhaps get involved in this. And that's how it started. And then we had our first meeting because I didn't know Chris until Paul introduced us. And the funniest thing was he never asked me right at the beginning, what's the worst thing you've ever seen? But at our first meeting or second meeting, he said, tell me something that I just wouldn't know. And I just started to laugh. And I said, well, I know what brains smell like. And he almost fell out of his chair. And I think that's what made him in and flash forward 12 years later and we have a movie made.
And it's in the movie. That exact line is in the movie. Yeah. That's, wow. What an incredible story.
I have one question. Awesome. When you wrote the short story, was it intended as sort of like, more of a humorous tale? And the reason I ask is because I find a lot of the shows that, there are a plethora of, 911, ambulance fire response shows, and they all focus on the we could save this man's life, we just need
remember Trauma?
Yeah,
you can only hook up the hydrant to the IV bag. We'll have enough fluid,
guys. Hold on, connect a line from my artery to their vein, we're gonna give them blood, and you're like, what the fuck are you and they try and focus on this, and they're trying to tell this story, but it's so it's so interesting. This drama that they've created is just so fake. Whereas Code 3, because it focuses on, I think, a lot of comedy and a lot of that, it's able to tell a truth that the other ones probably couldn't get away with. The interactions, the humor, it's able to tell we spend a lot of time joking with each other as we're, on our way to, perhaps some horrendous call, or, in between, and so I was just curious if that was sort of your intent when you set out.
It really wasn't intentional. Let me rephrase that. It was the original short story was written as a comedy. It was kind of a very long joke. It was a very dark joke. The original short story, again, I was very burnt out and very angry. When the short story is not, it's maybe the skeleton is in the movie, but a lot of it was very much edited. But it was I remember the whole point at the end, there was a punchline about a guy who had gotten shot, because that's the kind of humor that kind of lives in those circles. But ultimately, to gag on the drama bit in the short story, we saved his life. He did get shot, but the reason I think that those shows are why our show is so different is we aren't scared to kill people.
Yeah.
And so, spoiler alert in the movie, if you haven't seen it, go watch it because it's incredible, but I'm going to spoil some things here. We do things not a lot of movies do. If you think about the people that don't make it.
I precisely know the scene you're talking about too.
I mean, it's kind of like you get this great upswell and then we yank the rug out from underneath you, because guess what? That's what happens in real life. And
yes,
those are gut wrenching. But if all you're doing is focusing on the drama, then you can't let people die, or it has to be like some monumental explosion that, rockets the world. Whereas I certainly would never say I speak for all of EMS, but the realities of the job that I did was
no, so you're the mascot.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Just, yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
But I mean, it's people die. We make part of that coping mechanism is the off-brand humor that is shared. I've always said that EMS is one HR meeting away from crumbling.
Yeah.
But the real, and I do think, and I've said this before, I think that the gallows humor, the dark humor that's shared in the cab or amongst our coworkers in moderation is not only necessary but also healthy. Yeah. However, with this giant stipulation that I still feel is very important, when it becomes your only personality trait, you have a problem. And it's no longer you need to go get help. And I am the poster child for that too. But yeah, even the original version of the script, not even so much of the short story, was always told through a comedic lens, because that's kind of how we survive. And we see some terrible things. We've also, at least I've been party to some really amazing moments in life. And I think telling it honestly required us to kind of tell it through a comedic lens without shying away from the inherently dramatic or horrific things that also happens. Because you can't have, if it was all one and not the other, then you just have popcorn and candy and no one wants to watch that movie. And I've seen every comment online that's like, it's fake, the cars move out of the way, and they should have done 2 hours of lift assist and and holding the wall. It's nobody wants to watch that movie either, guys. I'm really sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
Can you imagine though if there was just a 40-minute scene where
movie,
just a crew standing against the wall?
Yeah.
Dispatch going, can you please expedite? They're like, no, I can't. I still have a patient on the gurney.
Oh god, it's on Facebook on their phone.
This guy the whole time looking over the page like, you dead? What's going on? You're so okay, cool.
Talking to patient about the kids. One of the things that you had mentioned, and this is going a little bit long for an intro for us, but I have an idea. We'll probably segment this, some of this out. But it's one of those things where I think a piece of advice that I was fortunate enough to get very, very early on, because I think one of the sources of burnout that goes beyond the clock in and you do call to call till you clock out. That's burnout in and of itself. But I think another source of that burnout is, like you mentioned earlier, is sometimes we run the perfect code. We do everything for this patient. They seem to come back and they die anyway. And so I think there's a early on FTO in my career that said that he goes, hey, if you evaluate your career and how well you're doing by the number of lives you saved, you won't last long. So he's like, evaluate your career by the increase of chance, the increase of probability that you give people, and he's like, it's going to go a lot farther, and so he's like, our goal is not to save lives. Our goal is to move the needle a little bit closer to a better outcome. And that's it. And so if you look at it that way, if you look at your job in terms of moving the needle and not necessarily saving a life, the job gets a lot better, because then at least you get to go home and be like, I moved that needle a lot. It wasn't enough. Nothing would have been enough. Yeah. We had a call. Spencer and I are both flight paramedics now with a company. We're on rotor wings. His rotor wing is a push start. Someone actually has to go out there and grab the prop and spin it. And then the pilot pops the clutch. Oh, that's right. You guys got a new one that's somehow better, but also worse. But anyway. It's new, but it's
the seats
small.
are really comfortable.
So
nice.
The seats are comfortable. I'm in a Bell 429, which is huge, but the seats suck. But anyway, there was a call that my base went on where this guy, he was out working on the back of his car. Another car, driver fell asleep, left the road, hit the guy between his car and the other car going freeway speeds.
Oof.
And they got there and the guy was technically alive. Patient didn't make it though.
Yeah.
Patient didn't make it. And they're kind of talking about there's some things here. And then finally, one of our more senior people who were sitting there said, that guy could have been hit by that car and thrown directly into an OR and he would have died anyway. There was just, his injuries were just incompatible with life and you just got there too soon.
Yeah.
That's pretty much all that is. But yeah, and so again, like I think it's just one of those things where if we look at it, look at our jobs as moving the needle, it gets a lot better. But with that, we're gonna roll our intro and we'll get in to see what Spencer has for us. Hey guys, what you just saw there was a clip from this episode of EMS 2020, and we want to thank X-Shear for sponsoring X-Shear Cuts. Be sure to check out xshear.com and get yourself a pair of trauma shears that actually work well for a very long time. And thanks for listening and watching.